A large-scale combined attack on Ukraine? Zelensky signed a gas agreement in Greece. And where should we expect snow? You are watching TSN Online. I'm Natalia Ostrovska, and I'm with you. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch the broadcast, and be sure to comment on what impressed you the most. A large-scale combined attack. The enemy launched 176 attack drones and 1 ballistic missile at several regions of Ukraine overnight. The Air Defense Forces report the Iskander-M missile, which the Russians launched from the Rostov region, could not be shot down. Most of the drones, these were Shakheds and Gerons that were flying in from several Russian cities, one enemy training ground, and from occupied Crimea were shot down by air defense forces. However, 37 enemy attack UAVs hit targets at 14 locations. There were also reports of debris from downed drones falling in 2 locations. Due to shelling by Russian terrorists, a number of settlements in the Chernihiv region were left without electricity. At first, the Russians attacked an energy facility in the Nizhyn district with drones and then struck the Koryukivka district as well. Energy workers are currently working to restore power. Transport infrastructure has also been damaged, according to the military administration. The occupiers also struck Chernihiv again with a drone. They destroyed an administrative building, and in Novgorod-Siversky, a drone strike also damaged the House of Culture. Energy facilities in Odesa region were also targeted by the enemy overnight. A solar power plant was also attacked. The fires that broke out were quickly extinguished. Critical infrastructure was connected to alternative power sources. Points of invincibility were set up in the affected area. 1 person was killed and 5 others were injured. These are the consequences of Russian attacks on settlements in Donetsk region. In Malinivka, an FPV drone used by the occupiers killed a civilian. Another person was injured. Drones also struck Kostiantynivka, Andriivka, Nekonorivka, and Pavlivka. There are wounded there. Kramatorsk was hit by drones and Talmaz. An apartment building and a critical infrastructure facility were damaged. In Kherson and Mykilsk, 3 people were killed. This was reported by the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. Another 11 people were wounded, most of them in the regional center, and 2 in Bilozerka and Komishani. In the Sumy community, an elderly woman was injured as a result of a drone strike. At night, the enemy attacked civilian infrastructure facilities with 3 Shahed drones. A fire broke out and at least 12.5 homes were damaged. Fierce fighting on the front continues even now, particularly near Kucheryavy Yar. This is the Dobropillia direction. There, according to deep state analysts, the defense forces once again pushed the enemy back from the village of Shakhov. Meanwhile, the Russians have advanced in Volodymyrivka and near Sofiivka. At the same time, the defense forces report that the assault on Novopavlivka in the Dnipropetrovsk region, which the enemy launched on Friday, has been repelled. The 9th Army Corps has released a video of destroyed Russian equipment that was taken out in Novopavlivka by fighters from several brigades holding the defense there. In the settlement, only isolated enemy forces remain. Russians are hiding in basements and in bombed-out buildings there. But Ukrainian soldiers are tracking them down and clearing them out. The fog, which has been covering the area for several days now, including the front line, has somewhat slowed the enemy's advance in Pokrovsk. This is reported by the fighters who are fighting there. Because of the weather, fewer drones are being launched there now, but close-quarters combat has intensified. Since the beginning of the day, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, there have already been more than 1,500 clashes along the entire front line, most of them in the Pokrovsk sector. For the first time in Zaporizhia, the defense forces shot down a Russian reconnaissance drone called Veshchy Oleg. This is a new drone used by the occupiers, which until now had only been spotted in the Donetsk region. It can reach speeds of up to 130 kilometers per hour and operate within 45 kilometers from its launch point of departure. This drone does not have a satellite navigation system and features a protected channel that is resistant to electronic warfare. The soldiers of the 118th Mechanized Brigade destroyed the enemy's wing of a standard 10-inch FPV drone. 57 Ukrainian drones targeted 6 regions of Russia. The Ministry of Defense of the aggressor country claimed that their air defense forces allegedly neutralized exactly this number of our drones last night. However, social media is flooded with videos showing drones attacking various targets in the Russian Federation. Already the previous evening, footage appeared of a drone flying and exploding in Volgograd. There, according to eyewitnesses, several drones have already once again struck the Lukoil oil refinery. At the same time, Russian air defense tried to shoot down the Ukrainian drones but hit a residential high-rise instead, according to Russian telegram channels. Also, last night, the Novokubishevsk oil refinery in the Samara region was hit. It is considered one of the key producers of high-grade fuel for jet engines. And finally, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine released a video showing Ukrainian Bars drones attacking several important enemy targets in temporarily occupied Donetsk region. In particular, they managed to strike a storage base for Rubicon unit drones and a station that pumps fuel and lubricants. President Volodymyr Zelensky's European tour continues today in Athens. There, the Ukrainian delegation was received in the palaces of Greece's top officials. Both countries signed an important energy agreement, which Zelensky had announced the day before. So what was agreed upon in the energy sector, and will we have enough gas this winter? A report from TSN correspondent Irina Kondrachuk from Greece follows.
A summery 20 degrees in Greece and conversations about the unbearable winter in Ukraine. That's how the visit of the Ukrainian delegation to Athens began. A plane under the blue and yellow flag landed at the local airport. Volodymyr Zelensky was met there. With all the ceremonial honors, his motorcade headed to the presidential palace. And what touched us most, especially along the roads of the Greek capital, was that the local people themselves stopped along the way to raise Greek and Ukrainian flags in their hands, smiling and waving at us. They were happy to see us, and this warm welcome was then echoed at the diplomatic level as well. The president in particular spoke about the ongoing support for Ukraine in its struggle for independence, as well as in the fight to restore its energy sector. And
this position of ours is a result of the fact that our country steadfastly supports the UN and international law, which was violated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
in particular, the most important agreement was reached a little later, after a brief conversation between the presidents and the two delegations. Volodymyr Zelensky met with the Prime Minister of Greece and also the heads of the state oil companies of Greece and Ukraine. Both signed an agreement contracting the transportation of gas from Greece to Ukraine, specifically to the city of Odesa. And these contracts will come into effect already in January 2026 and will be valid for a short period. During the heating season to cover the needs, and in the long term, they will also operate from a strategic perspective.
As part of the large energy package, today we signed an agreement with the Greek state-owned company for the supply of gas to Ukraine through the vertical corridor in the first quarter of 2026. That is, this is exactly the period when we need to replace our own production, which was destroyed by Russian terrorists. We have reached strategic long-term agreements for imported gas.
As for the volumes, the head of Naftogaz, Serhiy Koretsky, has so far asked not to go into details and did not name any figures, but said that this will cover part of the deficit we have. And our deficit amounts to 4.4 billion cubic meters of gas, and in monetary terms, this is 1,900 million euros. We remember that out of this amount, which is covered by our banks, European support, as well as support from other countries, including the Netherlands, there still remains 750 million euros to be found. Of course, they will continue to look for this amount. And of course, energy is not the only issue. The top officials of Greece have repeatedly expressed their gratitude and support to Volodymyr Zelensky, and in particular to the Ukrainian people in their fight against Russian aggression and for the integrity of Ukraine. After all, the issue of annexed territories and illegal occupation has been a painful one for them since the times of Cyprus. And they said that they would stand with Ukraine until the end, including helping to rebuild the country, as well as to bring back Ukrainian children who were abducted by Russia. Irina Kondrachuk, Yevhen Latvinenko, TSN 1+1.
He threatened to stop aid to Ukrainian refugees starting next year. The president of Poland announced that he recently signed a bill on financial support for our citizens. As Karol Nawrocki explained, he did this in order not to provoke chaos in his country. He also announced the need to streamline the support system. Although the politician admitted that Ukrainian refugees should be treated with proper responsibility, but the same approach should be taken with any other national minority and with Poles themselves. On September 26th, the President of Poland signed an amendment to the law on assistance to citizens of Ukraine. The new rules stipulate that, in order to receive assistance under the Family Plus social program, foreign refugees must earn at least 50% of the minimum wage, which in 2025 will be 2,333 zlotys, and the children of such families must attend a Polish school. An exception will be made only for people with disabilities. The changes also include restrictions on access to certain medical services for adult Ukrainian citizens. These include healthcare programs, medical rehabilitation, dental treatment, and medication programs. Collecting debts will become faster and easier. Debtors will be automatically entered into the registry, and until their debts are paid, will not be able to dispose of their property. The Verkhovna Rada has voted for a bill that simplifies debt collection through the digitalization of enforcement proceedings. The document still awaits a second reading and final approval, but there is already a lot of buzz around it. Can your only home really be taken away for debts, and how will the automatic debt collection system actually work? TSN correspondent Valentina Dobrota investigated the lawmakers' initiative. This registry on the Ministry of Justice website contains all debtors against whom proceedings have been initiated. It has existed for 9 years already, and everything here is simple. You enter your last name, tax number, and then it's all laid out like a confession. You either have a debt or you don't. In the endless list, you can even find the names of current members of parliament. Most of the debtors are among those who love to drive fast. There are approximately 600,000 proceedings for unpaid administrative fines. Another 500,000 are people who don't pay alimony. In third place, according to the Ministry of Justice, are utility debtors, of whom there are almost 250,000.
As of November 1st, 2025, the total outstanding debt of Kyiv residents to our company amounts to 6.3 billion hryvnias.
Konstantin Lopatin works for a company that supplies hot water and heating to Kyiv residents. For those who do not pay for these services, reminders about their debts are first sent in their bills, personal accounts, and they are offered debt restructuring. When appeals to conscience don't work, the matter is taken to court.
For example, there is an apartment with an area of 276 square meters on Mokra Street. The case is already being considered in court, but the amount of debt is truly shocking, 730,000 hryvnias. That's
How many years did it take to accumulate that?
since back in 2019,
They didn't pay at all?
not a thing. There is an apartment on Institutska Street with a debt which is also currently in court with a debt of 600,000 hryvnias. The area of the apartment, is 995 square meters.
It is the owners of elite real estate in the center of Kyiv who are the biggest debtors for heating and hot water. In total, Kyiv Teploenergo is currently in court with 16,500 Kyiv residents. Almost 3,000 of them refuse to pay even after the court's decision. They refuse to pay. Money will be collected from them by force. For this purpose, property, cars, and bank accounts are being seized. In
principle, this draft law is very similar to the one currently in effect. But unfortunately, there is one problem. This path is not the shortest.
Olelyak manages an HOA in one of the buildings on the left bank of the capital. He says that he has already gone to court 3 times with apartment owners over debts for building maintenance. After all, it is precisely these contributions that keep the apartment building functioning.
This is also a major psychological factor. Why? That person doesn't pay, and that's it. So I don't have to pay either. Let me give you a very simple example. I inherited an apartment and the sewage system there had rotted away. I called the chief engineer and said, "These aren't big expenses, so what's the problem?" He said, "The problem is very simple. The building owes me 895,000. That's more than enough to replace all the sewage and rainwater pipes in this building."
Olelyak says that due to the courts being overloaded, it can take a year to recover the debt. But if Bill 14205 is passed, says the head of the HOA, the process will speed up. At the request of TSN lawyer Ole Chornobai analyzed the lawmakers' proposals.
That is, it is assumed that including a person in the debtor registry will automatically extend the regime of seized property to all of their assets that are registered and known. This includes real estate, land plots as a type of real estate, vehicles, shares, and any corporate rights. Another issue is that the law also includes the concept of unfinished property. There is a set of building materials, and there are many court decisions that recognize ownership rights not to unfinished property but to building materials. How these decisions will be enforced is currently unknown and unregulated.
The lawyer emphasizes that the draft law refers to any debts, for example, between individuals, banks, or credit unions. But it is utility payments that have become a pressing issue during the war. According to the Ministry of Community Development, payment for utilities for destroyed or damaged property has not yet been fully regulated. If a person has left an area of active hostilities where living is unbearable, they still have to pay for heating and house maintenance. In temporarily occupied territories, debts accrued before the occupation remain on record. It is already possible to lose your only home due to debts. However, the amount of debt must exceed 20 minimum wages. Currently, that's 160,000 hryvnias. This is
difficult, but it has definitely happened. Such cases have occurred. But in our situation, if children are registered in the only home, we have to sell this property with the approval of the guardianship and custody authority. And the guardianship and custody authority usually does not give such approval. And that's why we end up in a deadlock situation where it seems like we can sell this property and we're obligated to, and there's a creditor who is still counting on getting what they're owed. But unfortunately, people artificially register children there, and this drags on for years sometimes. And sometimes people have their own children who come to visit there. Under such circumstances, it's quite difficult to sell the property.
seized property is only sold after the debtor refuses to pay the debt voluntarily. Andriy Haichenko says that the new changes will primarily improve the interaction of the Unified Debtors Register with other state registries, banks, and notaries. And after paying off the debt, the debtor will no longer have to look for a state executor to have their name removed from the debtors register and have the restrictions on property lifted. All of this will happen automatically.
A certain level of procedural detail included in this law, to some extent, let's say, minimizes the risk of certain corrupt or bribery schemes in the field of enforcement proceedings. Why? Because when the procedure is detailed, specifying how the enforcement officer should act, then their failure to act during this period of time automatically indicates certain violations.
What the final text of the draft law will be is still unknown. It is only being prepared for the second reading. Lawyers say that in order to avoid falling into a debt trap, people also need to work on their legal and financial literacy. Living on credit is easier, but even heirs will have to pay the debts.
And in your opinion, how should persistent debtors be punished, and is it appropriate to do so during wartime? Be sure to write about this in the comments to the broadcast, give us a like, and of course subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, I will continue with the TSN broadcast.